There is a specific metallic taste to asphalt that you only really get to appreciate when you are lying on your back, wedged underneath the rear differential of a Ford F-550 heavy-duty tow truck, clutching a lukewarm Dunkin' cup like it's a holy relic. From my vantage point, the world was reduced to greasy mechanical undercarriages, the terrifyingly large tread of a dually tire 6 inches from my nose, and a pair of sensible beige pumps, pacing back and forth furiously near the front bumper. "Gary, I am telling you to drive. Move the vehicle." The voice belonged to Patricia. Patricia is the president of the Oak Creek Homeowners Association, a woman who regards joy as a zoning violation and treats the neighborhood covenants like the Geneva Convention. "Lady," a deep, exhausted voice rumbled from the cab above me. This was Gary. I liked Gary. We had bonded briefly before I threw myself under his truck. "I ain't running over a homeowner. That's a lot of paperwork. And jail." "He is obstructing the enforcement of community guidelines," Patricia shrieked. Her voice hit a frequency that I'm pretty sure was making the neighborhood dogs lose their minds. "He is trembling! He's bluffing! Just inch forward, he'll move!" I took a sip of my coffee. It was mostly backwash and sugar at this point, but it gave me something to do with my hands other than shaking. I wasn't shaking from fear. I was shaking from the adrenaline of pure, unadulterated spite. "I'm not bluffing, Gary," I yelled up at the chassis. "I'm very comfortable. I've got lumbar support. If you roll this thing, you're going to hear a crunch that will haunt your dreams forever." "See?" Gary yelled out the window. "He says he's comfortable. I'm turning the engine off." The massive diesel engine shuddered and died. Silence descended on the cul-de-sac, save for the aggressive clicking of Patricia's heels on my driveway pavers. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of burnt oil and suburban warfare. This was it. This was the hill, or rather the driveway, I was going to die on. To understand why a 35-year-old systems analyst was currently acting like a frantic speed bump, you have to understand the boat, the Sea Esta. She wasn't a yacht. She wasn't some glittery pleasure cruiser for people who wear boat shoes, ironically. She was a 24-foot center console fishing boat with a solid hull, a reliable Yamaha outboard, and a few battle scars from the jagged rocks off the coast of Maine. I'd spent the last 3 years saving for her, scraping together bonuses and side gig cash. I bought her 3 days ago. I towed her home, parked her proudly in my driveway, my wide, double-lane private driveway, and spent the evening drinking a beer and just looking at her. The next morning there was a neon orange sticker on the windshield. "Violation, unauthorized watercraft storage, remove immediately." I thought I had time. The bylaws said something about a warning period. But Patricia didn't believe in warnings. She believed in shock and awe. She believed in calling Gary's Towing and Recovery at 6 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday while I was still in my boxers making toast. "Mike!" Patricia's face appeared upside down as she bent over to look under the truck. Her bob cut defied gravity, remaining perfectly rigid. "Get out from under there this instant. You are being childish." "I'm protecting my property, Patricia," I said, staring up at her nostrils. "The bylaws say I have 72 hours to remedy a violation. It's been 14. Subsection 4, paragraph B, she recited, because of course she had it memorized. Unsightly obstructions that affect neighborhood value or safety may be removed immediately at the discretion of the board. Your boat is ugly, Mike. It smells like dead fish. That's the smell of the ocean, Patricia. It's distinct, and it's not an obstruction. It's in my driveway. It projects, she sneered. The trailer hitch is 2 inches over the sidewalk line. That is a safety hazard for pedestrians. What pedestrians? I countered. The only person who walks on this side of the street is Mrs. Higgins, and she's legally blind. She'd bounce off the tire and keep walking. I have called the police, Patricia announced, standing back up and smoothing her skirt. They will extract you. Good, I yelled. Call the SWAT team. Tell them to bring donuts. I rested my head back on the asphalt. It was cold. My lower back was starting to spasm. I could hear the faint sound of neighbors' garage doors opening. The morning commuters were heading out, and I was providing the morning entertainment. I saw Dave from across the street walking his golden retriever. I waved a hand out from under the mud flap. Dave paused, looked at the tow truck, looked at my waving hand, and just kept walking. Smart man. About 10 minutes later, the familiar whoop-whoop of a siren cut through the morning air. Tires crunched on the gravel. Doors slammed. All right, what is going on here? I recognized the voice. Officer Miller. He'd been to my house once before when my alarm system malfunctioned and played the intrusion alert noise for 4 hours straight while I was on vacation. He was a good guy, mostly because he seemed just as tired of humanity as I was. I shimmied out from under the truck, creating a scene that I'm sure looked like a bizarre birth. I dusted off my jeans, stood up, and adjusted my t-shirt. I was covered in grease stains. Morning, Officer Miller, I said, trying to look like a respectable taxpayer despite the grease on my forehead. Officer Miller looked at me. He looked at the massive tow truck. He looked at the Sea Esta on its trailer. He looked at Patricia, who was vibrating with righteous indignation. Finally, he looked at his partner, a younger guy I didn't know, whose name tag read Perez. Mike, Miller sighed. Why were you under the truck? Peaceful protest, I said. He held the driver hostage, Patricia interjected, pointing a manicured finger at me. He threw his body in the way of a contracted service provider executing a lawful removal. Lawful? I laughed. She's trying to steal my boat, Miller. It's been in the driveway for less than 2 days. She cited a safety hazard because the hitch is near the sidewalk. Miller walked over to the trailer hitch. He looked at the sidewalk. He took out a tape measure from his belt. Why he had a tape measure, I don't know. Maybe for moments exactly like this. He measured the distance. It's not over the sidewalk, ma'am, Miller said, retracting the tape with a snap. It's got about 4 inches of clearance. That's irrelevant, Patricia snapped. It is an eyesore. The HOA rules clearly state— Ma'am, Miller interrupted, his voice dropping that octave that cops use when they are done being polite. This is private property. Unless this boat is stolen, unregistered, or leaking hazardous waste into the sewer, this is a civil matter. I can't make him move it, and I certainly can't let this tow driver take it without the owner's consent if the owner is present. Gary, the tow driver, leaned out of his cab. Does that mean I can go? Because I got a Honda Civic in a ditch on Route 9 waiting for me. Please go, Miller said, and be careful backing out. You are useless, Patricia screamed at Miller. I pay your salary. I will be calling the chief. This is a blight on the community. You do that, ma'am, Miller said, tipping his cap. He turned to me. Mike, keep the hitch off the sidewalk. And maybe wash the boat? It does smell a little bit. It's the smell of freedom, Miller, I said, grinning. The police cruiser pulled away. Gary, the tow driver, gave me a thumbs up, revved his engine, and backed out of the driveway, the heavy chains rattling as he escaped the vortex of Patricia's rage. I was left alone with her. The silence was heavier than the tow truck. Patricia didn't scream this time. She went deadly calm, which was infinitely worse. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a clipboard. She scribbled something furiously, ripped the page off, walked past me, and slapped a sticker directly onto the pristine white fiberglass hull of the Sea Esta. "That is a final notice," she said, her voice ice cold. "You have 48 hours. The bylaws allow the board to levy fines of $500 a day for uncorrected violations. And if it is not gone by Friday at noon, I won't call a tow truck next time. I will call the city code enforcement. Our bylaws are filed with the county. I will have them declare this property a nuisance site. I will put a lien on your house, Mike. I will bury you in so much litigation you'll have to sell that boat to pay for the paper clips." She turned on her heel and marched away, her pumps clicking a rhythm of war. Click, clack, click, clack. Click, clack. I stood there in the driveway, grease on my face, adrenaline fading into a dull throb in my temples. I looked at the sticker. It was the kind with the extra strong adhesive that takes a razor blade to remove. Violation. I wasn't going to move the boat. I couldn't move the boat. Storage lots in this town cost as much as a studio apartment, and my garage was full of woodworking tools I swore I'd use one day. But more importantly, it was the principle. I bought this house, I paid the mortgage. If I wanted to park a vessel of leisure in my own driveway, that was my God-given American right. I walked inside, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the coffee pot. I needed fresh coffee. I needed a plan. And I needed to read the enemy's playbook. I went into my office and dug through the junk drawer until I found it. The binder. The 3-inch thick Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions for Oak Creek Estates. It was a document written by bored lawyers and weaponized by bored retirees. I sat there for 6 hours. I read until my eyes bled. I highlighted. I used sticky notes. I cross-referenced with the city's municipal zoning codes online. Article 6, Section 9. No recreational vehicles, trailers, campers, or watercraft shall be stored on any driveway, front lawn, or street-facing yard for a period exceeding 24 hours. Okay, that was clear. Driveway, lawn, yard. I scanned the rest of the document. I looked for the word roof. Nothing. I looked for vertical limits. Nothing. I looked for airspace. Nothing. Then I opened the city zoning code. I navigated to the section on residential structures and appendages. Section 12.4. Homeowners are permitted to construct rooftop architectural embellishments, widows' walks, cupolas, and weather vanes, provided the total height does not exceed 35 feet from grade. I froze. I looked out the window at the Sea Esta. She was white. She had a center console that looked vaguely like a small room. She had a T-top roof. If you squinted really, really hard, she didn't look like a boat. She looked like a postmodern, avant-garde architectural statement. A slow, wicked grin spread across my face. Patricia wanted the driveway clear? I would clear the driveway. She wanted the lawn empty? I would leave the lawn pristine. She wanted to talk about architectural integrity? Oh, we were going to talk about architecture. But I couldn't do this alone. I was a systems analyst. I knew software. I didn't know how to calculate the load-bearing capacity of a standard asphalt shingle roof against a 4,500-pound fiberglass hull. I needed a professional. I needed someone who didn't ask why, but asked how much. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Big Sal, construction. Sal was a man who drove a van held together by duct tape and spite. He was the kind of contractor who, showed up at 10 a.m., finished the job by 2 p.m., and left a cloud of cigarette smoke that lingered for days. But he was a genius with steel. And more importantly, Sal had a vendetta. 2 years ago, the HOA fined him for parking his commercial van on the street while he was fixing my deck. He had to park 3 blocks away and carry lumber by hand. He still talked about it. I dialed. Yeah? Sal answered on the second ring. Sounds of a jackhammer in the background. Sal, it's Mike from Oak Creek. Mikey, how's the deck? It holding up? Deck is great, Sal. Listen, I have a job. A weird job. Weird good or weird illegal? Weird expensive. And legal, technically. I'm listening. I need to put something on my roof, something heavy. Like a hot tub? Don't do it, Mikey. Water weight is a nightmare. You'll crash through into the master bath while you're scrubbing your back. Not a hot tub, Sal. A boat. The line went silent. The jackhammer in the background stopped, as if even the tool was listening. A boat, Sal repeated. A 24-foot center console, about 4,500 pounds with the engine. On the roof. On the roof. Why? Because Patricia said I can't have it on the driveway. There was a pause. A long, beautiful pause. Then a low, gravelly chuckle started. It grew into a laugh. It grew into a wheezing cackle that sounded like a garbage disposal chewing on a spoon. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Sal said. I'm bringing the laser level. Sal's van rolled up 20 minutes later. It was a terrifying vehicle, a Ford E-Series that was mostly rust and Bondo. He parked it directly in front of my house, 2 wheels up on the curb, knowing full well it would trigger a sensor in Patricia's brain. Sal hopped out. He was a mountain of a man, wearing work boots that had seen more combat than most tanks, and a t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing. I'm explaining why I'm right." Spelled wrong. Show me the victim, Sal said, chewing on an unlit cigar. I pointed to the Siesta. Sal walked around it. He kicked the tires of the trailer. He tapped the hull. He looked up at my house, a standard 2-story suburban colonial with a moderate pitch roof. The pitch is manageable, Sal muttered, talking to himself. Trusses are standard 2x4s, 16 on center. Garbage. Absolute garbage. We put that boat on there now, you'll be fishing in your living room. Can we reinforce it? I asked. Can we reinforce it? Sal scoffed. Mikey, with enough steel and enough money, I can make your roof hold a tank. The question is the structure. We gotta go into the attic. We gotta install steel I-beams spanning the load-bearing walls. We build a cradle, a steel cradle that punches through the roof deck, sealed with flashing, custom-welded. The boat sits on the cradle, not the shingles. It floats. How much? I asked. Sal did some mental math, his eyes looking at the sky. Materials, crane, labor, rush fee, because I want to see the look on that witch's face. Call it 15 grand. 15 grand. That was my emergency fund. That was the new kitchen fund. I looked across the street. Patricia was standing in her window, watching us through the blinds. I saw the blinds twitch. She was probably already writing down Sal's license plate number. Do it, I said. When can you start? I got a job finishing up downtown, Sal said, grinning. I can have the steel here tomorrow. We prep for 2 days. Saturday morning? We fly. Saturday morning, I agreed. But Sal? We have to be sneaky. If she knows what we're doing, she'll get an injunction. Sal looked at the boat, then at the roof. We ain't building a boat support, Mikey. We're building a solar panel array reinforcement system. Very eco-friendly. Very 2025. You tell anyone who asks, you're going green. You're a genius, Sal. I know, he said. Now help me get my ladder. We gotta measure your attic. The next 48 hours were a blur of deception and industrial noise. I moved the siesta to a self-storage lot 3 towns over. It cost me $200 for the week, but it was necessary theater. When Patricia drove by that evening and saw the empty driveway, she actually stopped her car. I was sitting on the porch. She rolled down the window. "I see you came to your senses, Mike." "You were right, Patricia," I said, putting on my best defeated face. "It was an eyesore. I got rid of it." "Good," she sniffed. "Let's keep it that way, and I expect that oil stain on the pavers scrubbed by Monday." "You got it, Prez." She drove off, smugness radiating from her tailpipes. She thought the war was over. She didn't know we were just mobilizing the troops. The next morning, the steel arrived. Not on a massive truck that would raise suspicion, but piece by piece in the back of Sal's van and his cousin Vinny's pickup. They carried the I-beams into the house through the back door, like ants carrying oversized crumbs. From the outside, nothing looked different. Inside my attic, however, it looked like the Brooklyn Bridge. Sal was welding. The smell of ozone and melting metal filled the upstairs hallway. I had fans pointing out the back windows to vent the fumes. "This is overkill," Sal said, wiping sweat from his forehead as he bolted a 6-inch steel column to the frame of the house. "This cradle could hold a school bus." "Better safe than sorry." I handed him a water bottle. "You got the permit?" "I got the permit." I held it up. I had gone to the city building department that morning. The permit description read, "Installation of roof-mounted structural support for decorative cupola weather vane system." The clerk, a guy named Dave, different Dave, had looked at it. "How big is this weather vane?" "It's significant," I had said. "It's a statement piece." Dave stamped it. He didn't care, as long as the check cleared. By Friday night, the cradle was ready. 4 heavy-duty steel mounting points poked up through my shingles, capped and flashed with waterproof boots. From the street, they looked like vents. Maybe weird, heavy-duty vents, but vents nonetheless. I didn't sleep Friday night. I lay in bed listening to the house settle, knowing that tomorrow the structural integrity of my home and my sanity would be tested. Saturday morning, 6 a.m. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when the ground started to shake. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a Liebherr all-terrain mobile crane. It was yellow. It was the size of a dinosaur. It turned onto our street, its massive tires crushing the edge of the manicured median strip that Patricia loved so dearly. The crane parked directly in front of my house. The outriggers extended, chunk, and planted themselves on the asphalt, lifting the massive machine until it was level. Lights flickered on in houses up and down the street. Front doors opened. People in bathrobes stepped out, shielding their eyes against the glare of the crane's work lights. And then, from the other direction, came the flatbed truck carrying the siesta. I walked out my front door, holding a fresh cup of coffee. I was wearing my captain's hat. I don't know why I bought it, but it felt appropriate. Patricia's front door flew open. She didn't even put on a robe. She was in a silk pajama set that cost more than my first car, and she was screaming before she even hit the sidewalk. "Stop! Stop this immediately!" She ran toward the crane operator, a guy named Bud, who was sitting in the glass cab wearing ear protection. He didn't even look at her. She turned to me. "Mike, what is this? What is that machine doing? You cannot block the street. This is a fire lane violation." "It's a delivery, Patricia," I said calmly. "Just a little home improvement." "You are bringing the boat back?" she shrieked, seeing the siesta on the flatbed. "I told you, no boats in the driveway. I will call the police. I will have you arrested." "It's not going in the driveway, Patricia," I said, checking my watch. "Sal, are we rigged?" Sal appeared on my roof. He was wearing a safety harness and holding a walkie-talkie. "Rigged and ready, Captain." "Hook her up," I yelled. Patricia froze. She looked at Sal on the roof. She looked at the boat. She looked at the crane hook descending from the sky like the hand of God. "No," she whispered. "No, you wouldn't." "Watch me," I said. The riggers on the ground attached the spreader bars to the boat's lifting eyes. The straps went taut. The boat lifted inches off the trailer. "Up!" Sal barked into the radio. The diesel engine of the crane roared. The Siesta, all 24 feet of her, rose into the air. She ascended past the mailbox. She ascended past the first-floor window. She ascended past the gutters. The entire neighborhood was watching now. Phones were out. People were live streaming. I saw Mrs. Higgins, the blind one, squinting at the large white blur in the sky. It's flying," one of the neighbor kids whispered. Patricia was hyperventilating. She was clutching her chest. That is a hazard. It will fall. It will crush us all." "It's perfectly safe," I yelled over the engine noise. "Engineered steel trusses, Patricia. It's stronger than your marriage." The boat swung gently in the morning breeze, hovering over the peak of my roof. Sal guided it with hand signals. "Down, easy!" "Left, kick it left!" Slowly, majestically, the boat lowered. The keel settled into the custom steel V-cradle Sal had welded. The mounting brackets lined up with the precision of a NASA docking sequence. Thunk! Sal threw 2 massive locking pins into place. He grabbed his impact wrench. Zip, 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 zip! He stood up, unclipped his safety line, and raised his arms in victory. "She's docked!" Sal screamed. The crane cable went slack. The hook was detached. The crane retracted its boom. And there she sat. My boat. My beautiful 24-foot fishing boat, sitting proudly on the peak of my roof, 30 feet in the air, gleaming in the rising sun. I walked over to the ladder Sal had left set up. I climbed up to the roof. I scrambled up the shingles, grabbed the gunnel, and hauled myself into the cockpit. I sat in the captain's chair. I looked down. Patricia was a small, shrinking dot of rage on the sidewalk. "Ahoy, Patricia!" I shouted, waving. "Get down from there!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Get that monstrosity off your roof!" "I can't," I yelled back. "It's not a boat anymore. It's an architectural feature. It's a widow's walk. Check the zoning codes, section 12.4. "I am calling the police," she screamed, fumbling for her phone. "I am calling the National Guard." "Call 'em." I popped the tab on a non-alcoholic beer. It was 7 a.m., I had standards, and took a swig. "But you better tell them to bring a ladder." Sirens wailed in the distance. Again. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the gentle sway of, well, nothing, because the house was solid. But in my mind, I was bobbing on the waves of victory. "Welcome aboard," I whispered to myself. Part 2. Officer Miller arrived 10 minutes later. He didn't rush this time. He pulled the cruiser up to the curb, put it in park, and just sat there for a full minute. I could see him through the windshield. He took off his sunglasses. He rubbed his eyes. He put the sunglasses back on. He got out of the car. He didn't look at Patricia, who was currently assaulting his partner, Officer Perez, with a barrage of verbal abuse. He walked to the center of the street, crossed his arms, and looked up. I stood up in the boat and saluted. "Morning, officer. Permission to come ashore?" Miller shook his head. He walked over to the base of the ladder where Sal was currently packing up his tools. "Is it secure?" Miller asked Sal. "Officer?" Sal said, lighting a cigar. That boat is more secure than the foundation of this house. I used grade 8 bolts. It ain't going nowhere unless the house goes with it. Is it legal? Miller asked. I got the permit right here. Sal whipped the paper out of his back pocket. Roof-mounted structural support for cupola. Miller took the paper. He read it. He looked up at the boat. He looked back at the paper. It's a boat, sir, Miller said. It's a cupola, Sal corrected. Shaped like a boat. It's art. Who are we to judge art? Patricia stormed over, dragging Officer Perez by the emotional ear. Arrest them! Arrest them all! Reckless endangerment! Zoning violation! Insanity! Miller handed the permit back to Sal. He turned to Patricia. Ma'am, Miller said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Is the boat on the driveway? No, but... Is it on the lawn? No, look at it. It's on the roof. Right, Miller said. And does the HOA have a bylaw regarding roof ornaments? Patricia froze. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Her brain was frantically scanning the thousands of pages of text stored in her head. The height restriction, she grasped. Nothing over 35 feet. Miller looked at me. How high is the top of that T-top, Mike? 34 feet. 6 inches, I yelled down. We measured twice. Liar, Patricia screamed. I demand a measurement. Go ahead, I said. Come on up. I'll lower the ladder for you. Patricia turned purple. She looked at Miller. Do something. Ma'am, Miller said. He has a building permit. The structure is secure. It is not on the driveway. It is not on the lawn. As far as I can tell, he has complied with your request to move the vehicle. This is mockery. This is malicious compliance, Miller corrected. And I swear I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. And frankly, it's the funniest thing I've seen in 20 years on the force. We're leaving. Stop calling 911 unless the boat actually falls on someone. Miller turned and walked back to his car. He paused at the door, looked up at me, and spoke into his shoulder radio. A second later, the PA system of the cruiser clicked on. Nice boat, Mike. The police drove away. The crane drove away. Sal drove away, honking his horn. I was left alone on my roof. The neighbors were starting to disperse, chattering excitedly. Some were taking selfies with my house in the background. I knew this wasn't over. Patricia was currently on her phone, pacing in circles on her lawn like a tiger in a zoo cage. She was calling the heavy hitters. The lawyers, the city inspectors, the mayor, probably. But for now, I had the high ground. Literally. I went downstairs to get a refill on coffee and a sandwich. My phone was blowing up. Texts from friends, neighbors, and people I hadn't spoken to in high school. Dude, is that your house on Reddit? I opened the link. There it was. A picture of the Siesta hovering mid-air with the caption, HOA Karen gets wrecked by skyboat. It had 40,000 upvotes. I sat at my kitchen table, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. Had won the battle. But the war? The war had just gone nuclear. An hour later, a white sedan with the city seal on the door pulled up. This wasn't Dave the permit guy. This was Inspector Vance. I knew Vance by reputation. He was the guy the city sent when they wanted to condemn a meth lab or demolish a structurally unsound barn. He didn't have a sense of humor. He had a clipboard and a frowning problem. Patricia practically tackled him as he got out of the car. "Inspector, thank God, look at it. Tell him to take it down immediately." Vance looked up. He didn't blink. He adjusted his glasses. He walked up the driveway. I met him at the door. "Mr. Mike Henderson?" Vance asked. "That's me. I'm going to need to inspect the structural modifications made to this dwelling. We have received a report of unpermitted load-bearing alterations posing an imminent collapse hazard." "I have a permit," I said, handing it to him. Vance looked at it. "This permit is for a cupola. That is a watercraft." "It's a nautical-themed cupola," I said. "It's hollow. No engine." A lie, the engine was still there, but I'd drained the fluids. "I need to see the attic," Vance said. I led him upstairs. Patricia tried to follow. "Not you," I said, blocking the door. "Private property. You stay on the porch." "I have a right as HOA president to—" "You have the right to remain silent," I said, and slammed the door. I took Vance to the attic. He shined his flashlight on the steel beams. He looked at the welds. He looked at the bolts. He spent 20 minutes measuring the load distribution. He tapped the steel with a pen. He didn't say a word. He just breathed heavily through his nose. Finally, he turned to me. "Who did this work?" "Sal's Construction." Vance nodded slowly. "Sal, crazy bastard. But he can weld." "Is it up to code?" I asked, holding my breath. Vance looked at the massive steel cradle that was essentially holding my roof together now. "Mr. Henderson, this structure is currently the strongest part of your entire house. If a tornado hits, the house will blow away, and this boat will still be floating here in the air. It's excessive, but it's not a violation." "So I can keep it," Vance sighed. He closed his clipboard. "The code defines a structure as anything built or constructed. The code defines height restrictions. It doesn't define taste. Legally, it stands, but I'm writing you up for not having a railing on the access ladder." "I'll install one today," I promised. Vance walked out. Patricia was waiting, looking like a vulture expecting a carcass. "Well?" she demanded. "When is the demolition crew coming?" Vance stopped. He looked at Patricia. "The structure passes inspection, ma'am. It is code compliant." Patricia let out a sound that sounded like a balloon deflating. "What? That is impossible. It is a boat." "It is a roof-mounted architectural feature," Vance said tiredly. "Have a nice day." Patricia stood there, her mouth opening and closing. She looked at Vance driving away. She looked at me. "This isn't over," she hissed. "The board will meet tonight. We will fine you. We will fine you for the aesthetics. We will fine you for the commercial signage on the side of the boat. We will fine you until you are bankrupt." "You do that, Patricia," I said. "But tonight? Tonight I'm hosting a christening party. You're not invited." I spent the rest of the afternoon making preparations. I strung lights, solar-powered, of course, along the railing of the boat. I set up a Bluetooth speaker system in the cockpit. I stocked the cooler. By 7:00 p.m., the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood. The siesta looked magnificent. My friends started arriving. They didn't come to the front door. They came to the ladder I had secured to the side of the house. "Permission to come aboard," shouted my buddy Steve, carrying a case of beer. "Granted." We had 6 people in the boat. We were 30 feet in the air, drinking cold beer, listening to Jimmy Buffett, it was mandatory, and watching the neighborhood below. Down on the street, people were walking by. They weren't scowling anymore. They were laughing. They were pointing. "Hey, Mike!" a neighbor from 2 streets over yelled up. "Nice yacht!" "Thanks, Bill," I yelled back. "Water's a little low today." It was perfect. Until the floodlights came on. At 9:00 p.m. exactly, A bank of high-intensity portable floodlights sitting on Patricia's lawn flicked on, aimed directly at my roof. It was like being interrogated by aliens. "Hey!" I yelled, shielding my eyes. "Turn that off!" "Security lighting!" Patricia yelled from her darkness. "I am concerned about trespassers on the roof. It is for your safety." She was blinding us. She was trying to ruin the party. "Okay," I said to Steve. "She wants to play with lights? Hand me the switch." "You didn't," Steve grinned. "I did." I had asked Sal to wire the boat's navigation lights into the house mains, but I had also asked him to install a little something extra. A collision warning system. I flipped a switch on the console. Mounted on the T-top of the boat was a remote-controlled searchlight, the kind used by Coast Guard cutters to find people in rough seas. It was 5 million candle power. I aimed it. I hit the joystick. The beam cut through the night like a lightsaber. It landed directly on Patricia's bedroom window. "Whoops," I said. "Turn it off!" she shrieked from somewhere below. "I'm checking for icebergs, Patricia," I yelled. "Safety first." I swept the light away, but I left the navigation lights on. Red on port, green on starboard, glowing softly in the night. The party continued until 11:00 p.m., the legal noise ordinance limit. We climbed down the ladder, feeling triumphant. But the next morning the letter was taped to my front door. It wasn't a fine. It was a court summons. Oak Creek Homeowners Association versus Michael Henderson. Plaintiff seeks immediate injunctive relief for the removal of unauthorized structure and damages for emotional distress. She had sued me. She had actually sued me. I looked at the boat on the roof. I looked at the summons. "All right, Siesta," I muttered. "Looks like we're going to court." The thing about declaring war on a homeowners association is that you can't just rely on logic. Logic is a foreign language to people who measure grass height with a ruler. You have to rely on spectacle. You have to rely on the court of public opinion. And most importantly, you have to rely on the local 5:00 p.m. news cycle, which is desperate for anything that isn't a cat stuck in a tree or a recap of the pothole situation on Main Street. 2 days after the summons was taped to my door, the media arrived. I was in the kitchen making a smoothie when I heard a heavy knock. I checked the doorbell camera. It wasn't Patricia. It was a guy in a sharp blue suit with hair so perfectly coiffed it looked like a Lego piece. Behind him stood a cameraman with a massive shoulder rig. The side of their van read Channel 8 Action News, "On your side." I didn't answer the door. Instead, I grabbed my walkie-talkie. I kept one in the kitchen now, connected to the one in the boat, and radioed up to the roof. "Sal, you up there?" "Yeah, boss," Sal's voice crackled. He was up there installing the safety railing, which was actually polished brass tubing that made the Siesta look like the VIP section of a Titanic lifeboat. "I'm polishing the brass. It shines like a diamond." "We got company," I said. "News crew, I'm coming up. Prepare the gangway." I climbed the ladder on the side of the house, which we had now painted to match the siding, so it was camouflaged. It wasn't. I scrambled onto the roof, hopped into the boat, and stood at the helm. "Okay," I said to myself. "Show time." I grabbed the megaphone I had purchased specifically for communicating with the groundlings. "Attention Channel 8 News Team!" My voice boomed across the cul-de-sac, echoing off the vinyl siding of the neighbors' houses. The reporter jumped. He looked around wildly. Then he looked up. "Up here!" I waved. "Welcome aboard." The cameraman swung his lens upward. The reporter, a guy I recognized as Chip Rockwell, a name that destined him for broadcast journalism, squinted into the sun. Sir? Are you living in the boat? Chip shouted up. Living? No, I shouted back, leaning casually against the center console. I am experiencing the boat. This isn't a residence, Chip. It's an elevated perspective. It's a statement on the duality of suburban confinement and nautical freedom. Can we come up? Chip asked. Liability issues, I lied. Maritime law, but I can do the interview from here. Chip nodded to his cameraman. Rolling? Rolling. We are here live at Oak Creek Estates, Chip began, using his serious news voice, where one homeowner has taken the concept of dry dock to new heights. Sir, the HOA claims this is a spiteful violation of community standards. What do you say to that? Spite? I scoffed, hand on my chest. Chip, look at the lines. Look at the way the hull catches the morning light. This isn't a boat. The city inspector confirmed it. This is a monitor-style cupola with fiberglass cladding. It's an homage to the whaling history of, well, not this area specifically, but America in general. At that precise moment, Patricia's front door burst open. She had sensed the camera lens like a shark senses blood in the water. "He is a liar!" she screamed, rushing toward the news crew. She was wearing a floral blouse that clashed violently with her red face. "Do not film him. He is making a mockery of our property values." "And here is the HOA president, Patricia Gable," Chip said, pivoting smoothly. This guy was a pro. "Ms. Gable, the homeowner claims he has a valid building permit. Why is the HOA suing?" "Because it is a boat!" Patricia shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "It belongs in the water. It does not belong on a roof. It is dangerous. It is ugly. It blocks the sun." "It blocks the sun?" Chip asked, raising an eyebrow. "Ma'am, it's 24 feet long. The sun is very big. He shines lights in my windows," she pivoted. "He has a searchlight. He creates a nuisance." "They are navigation lights, Patricia," I amplified my voice over her shrieking. "Per FAA regulations for structures exceeding a certain coolness factor. I don't want a low-flying Cessna to clip my T-top." The segment aired that night. They cut it together beautifully. They played dramatic music while zooming in on the siesta, then cut to Patricia looking like a deranged banshee screaming about the sun, then back to me sipping a beverage in the captain's chair, looking like the king of cool. The internet loved it. Roofboat became a trend. A GoFundMe was started by strangers to pay my legal fees. Keep the boat afloat. By the next morning, I had raised $4,000, but the viral fame only made the HOA angrier. That afternoon, I received a hand-delivered letter from a law firm, O'Malley, Finch, and Stammers. Heavy hitters. They weren't just suing for removal anymore. They were suing for breach of contract, CCNRs, nuisance, intentional infliction of emotional distress on Patricia, depreciation of neighboring property assets. They wanted $100,000 in damages and a court order to demolish the roof structure. I needed a lawyer, not a "my cousin does real estate closings" lawyer. I needed a shark. I needed a lawyer who looked at a courtroom the way a butcher looks at a side of beef. I found him in a strip mall next to a vape shop. His sign said, "Fletcher the Hammer Davis. We sue HOAs. We sue everybody." Fletcher was a small man with a suit that was slightly too large and eyes that were slightly too close together. His office smelled of old leather and victory. I sat down and showed him the picture of the boat. Fletcher stared at it for a long time. He didn't blink. He reached into his desk, pulled out a bottle of antacid tablets, chewed 2 of them, and then smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Beautiful," he whispered. "Can we win?" I asked. "Win?" Fletcher laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "Mr. Henderson, we're not just going to win. We're going to dismantle their entire worldview. You see, HOAs rely on fear. They rely on the assumption that you will fold because you have a job and a life. But they made a mistake." "What mistake?" "They let you modify the structure." Fletcher tapped the photo. "The moment that boat was bolted to the steel beams, it ceased to be personal property. It became real property. It became a fixture. Do you know what's required to force a homeowner to remove a permitted addition to their primary residence?" "No." "A miracle," Fletcher said. "Or a direct violation of a zoning ordinance, which you don't have. They're suing you on aesthetics. Aesthetics are subjective. We need to prove that your boat is not an eyesore, but a work of art." "How do we do that?" "Leave it to me," Fletcher said. "I know a guy. A critic. Very pretentious. Very expensive. He'll write a review of your roof that will make the Guggenheim jealous." The week before the trial was a blur of psychological warfare. Patricia organized a protest. She got 5 other board members, all over the age of 70, to march in front of my house with signs that said, "Sink the boat" and "Eyesore ahoy." I countered by hosting a roof boat open house. I didn't let anyone inside the house, obviously, but I lowered a basket on a rope filled with candy and pamphlets explaining my side of the story. The neighborhood kids loved it. I was the cool, eccentric guy. Patricia was the witch. Then came the safety inspection. Patricia had convinced the fire marshal to come out, claiming the boat was a fire hazard. The marshal, a guy named Captain Halloway, climbed up the ladder. He looked at the boat. He looked at the fiberglass. He looked at the empty gas tank. I had replaced it with a water reservoir for a misting system. "There's no fuel?" Halloway asked. "No, sir, just water." "And these wires?" "Low voltage LED, solar powered, no heat generation." Halloway looked at the fire extinguisher I had mounted on the console. "You have a fire extinguisher," he noted. "Safety first, Captain." Halloway sighed. He signed his form. "It's not a fire hazard. It's weird, but it's not going to burn down." Patricia was waiting at the bottom of the ladder, practically foaming at the mouth. "Well, condemn it! Condemn the structure!" "Ma'am," Halloway said, "he has better fire suppression up there than you have in your kitchen. Leave him alone." Patricia let out a primal scream and stomped back to her house. But the real blow came the night before the trial. I was up on the boat, doing some light reading, Sun Tzu's The Art of War, when I saw Patricia in her backyard. She was with a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a jumpsuit and holding a decibel meter. She was trying to get me on noise. I smiled. I reached under the console. "Sal," I whispered into the radio, "deploy the silent countermeasure." "Copy that," Sal replied from wherever he was. I had installed a wind chime, but not a normal wind chime. This was a custom-built, industrial-grade wind chime made from cut sections of 4-inch steel pipe. It was tuned to a low, resonant frequency that was soothing to me, but apparently drove Patricia insane. It clanged softly in the breeze. Gong. Gong. I saw Patricia checking the meter. It wasn't registering above the ambient noise level. It was perfectly legal. She threw the meter on the ground. I raised my non-alcoholic beer in a toast. "See you in court, Patty." The courtroom was packed. It seemed the entire neighborhood had taken the day off work. The siesta saga had become local folklore, and everyone wanted to see the finale. On the left side of the aisle sat Patricia and the HOA board. They were dressed in their Sunday best, looking like a row of angry beige gargoyles. Their lawyer, Mr. O'Malley, sat at the table, looking confident and expensive. On the right side sat me and Fletcher. Fletcher was wearing a tie that had sharks on it. It was subtle, but it was there. The bailiff announced, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harold P. Witherbottom." Judge Witherbottom walked in. He was a man who looked like he had been carving courthouses out of granite with his bare hands for 50 years. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the docket. "Case 49204, he rumbled. "Oak Creek HOA versus Henderson. The matter of the boat." He looked over his glasses at me, then at Patricia. "I have seen the pictures," the judge said. "I have to say, in 30 years on the bench, this is a first." Mr. O'Malley stood up. "Your Honor, this is a clear-cut case of covenant violation. The defendant has parked a 24-foot recreational vessel on the roof of his home. It is a blight. It violates the spirit of the community. It is a mockery of the rules." "The spirit of the community?" Fletcher stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He leaned back in his chair. "Your Honor, the plaintiff relies on spirit. We rely on the letter of the law. The defense calls its first witness, Professor Julian Von Drench, art critic for the Metro Arts Gazette." The doors opened. A man walked in wearing a scarf. It was July. He was wearing a scarf, round spectacles, and a beret. Fletcher had really outdone himself. Von Drench took the stand. "Professor," Fletcher said, "you have examined the structure at 42 Maple Drive?" "I have," Von Drench said, his voice dripping with disdain for the mundane. "And in your professional opinion, is it a boat?" "A boat?" Von Drench scoffed. "Heavens, no. A boat is a utilitarian vessel for transport. What Mr. Henderson has created is a kinetic sculpture of suburban escapism. It is a commentary on rising sea levels. It is a juxtaposition of the domestic and the pelagic. It is sublime." The courtroom murmured. Patricia looked like she was going to have a stroke. "Objection!" O'Malley shouted. "This is ridiculous! It has an outboard motor." "Does it run?" Fletcher asked. "No," I said from the table. "I drained the oil." "It is a static sculpture," Von Drench insisted. "The motor is merely an aesthetic appendage representing the industrial futility of man." The judge rubbed his temples. "I'll allow it. It's certainly an interpretation." "Your Honor," O'Malley argued, "this is wordplay. The CC&Rs explicitly ban boats on the property." "Let's look at that text," Fletcher said, pulling out a blow-up board of the HOA bylaws. He pointed to Article 6. "No recreational vehicles or watercraft shall be stored on any driveway, front lawn, or street-facing yard." Fletcher turned to the jury. There was no jury, it was a bench trial, but he turned to the audience anyway for dramatic effect. "Driveway, lawn, yard." Fletcher counted them off on his fingers. "Is the roof a driveway?" "No," O'Malley admitted. "Is it a lawn?" "No." "Is it a yard?" "It is part of the property." "But it is not defined as a yard in the definitions section of your own document." Fletcher slammed his hand on the board. "Your document defines yard as the ground area surrounding the dwelling. The roof is the dwelling, not the yard. Therefore, the ban does not apply." Patricia stood up. She couldn't help herself. "He did it to mock me," she screamed. "He is a menace." Sit down, Ms. Gable, the judge warned. I will not, she yelled. I am the president. I make the rules. You enforce the rules, the judge corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous baritone. You do not make them, and you certainly do not rewrite them in my courtroom to suit your vendetta. Fletcher smiled. He knew he had her. Your Honor, Fletcher said softly, I have one more piece of evidence, the estoppel argument. Ms. Gable explicitly told my client, in front of witnesses, including Officer Miller, to get that boat off the driveway immediately or face fines. My client complied. He moved it off the driveway. He spent $15,000 to comply with her demand. Now she wants to fine him for the solution she forced him to create? That is detrimental reliance, Your Honor. That is entrapment. The judge looked at Patricia. He looked at the bylaws. He looked at the picture of the boat on the roof. Slowly, the judge started to chuckle. It started in his belly and shook his shoulders. Order, he said to himself, trying to stop laughing. Order. He composed himself. Ruling for the defense, the judge stated. The courtroom erupted. Patricia gasped. The bylaws are specific, the judge continued. They list prohibited areas. The roof is not one of them. While I question the defendant's sanity, I cannot question his compliance. The boat, the sculpture, stays. Furthermore, the judge glared at O'Malley. The plaintiff is ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees. And, since the defendant was forced to undertake significant construction to comply with the plaintiff's aggressive demands, the plaintiff is ordered to reimburse the construction costs of the cradle. $15,000. What? Patricia shrieked. We have to pay for it? You ordered him to move it, the judge shrugged. He moved it. Next time, write better bylaws. Case dismissed. The check from the HOA arrived 2 weeks later. It was signed by the treasurer, not Patricia. Patricia resigned 3 days after the trial, citing health reasons, but everyone knew it was because the neighborhood had turned against her. The boat on the roof had become a symbol of resistance. People were painting their mailboxes bright colors. Someone installed a gargoyle on their porch. The reign of beige terror was over. I used the $15,000 check to upgrade the sound system on the Sea Esta. It's been 6 months now. The boat is still there. It's weathered a few storms. Literally and metaphorically. It's become a landmark. Pizza delivery drivers use it for navigation. Turn left at the boathouse. I get fan mail. Sometimes in the evenings, I climb up the ladder with a cold drink. I sit in the captain's chair, high above the manicured lawns and the silent streets. I watch the sun go down over the subdivision, turning the sky a brilliant nautical orange. I'm not going anywhere. The Sea Esta has found her permanent port, and if they ever try to ban boats on roofs, well, I've been looking at the zoning codes for subterranean bunkers. I hear submarines are very spacious this time of year.